respected Maharaj and distinguished participants in this meeting. Actually, it's an auspicious occasion when we are going to recall the memory of a very distinguished personality about whom there is a short introduction which I am going to read out. Mrs. Sukhnandan Bhagat Memorial Lecture. The lady, a remarkable personality, born on the 24th June 1910, was the eldest of 6 children of her father, Diwan Dinanath, who served as minister in the then state of Mandi in Himachal Pradesh, later in Patiala in Punjab, and then in Indore in the central province. In her childhood, she went to a convent school in Mhow. She was brought up in a protected and conservative manner under the benign care of her mother in the luxury of erstwhile princely states. At the early age of 15, she was married to Sri Madan Gopal Bhagat of Lahore. Mrs. Sukhnandan Bhagat was a traditional housewife with a liberal outlook. She was a loving mother to her children. She and her husband started life under very difficult circumstances. They both faced hardships and problems in their early life. Mrs. Sukhnandan Bhagat stood by her husband with fortitude and with great love and affection. She was a lady of that generation when husband and family got the prime consideration. She helped her husband in raising their own family. She extended constant support to her husband, who has by now achieved great success. Mrs. Sukhnandan Bhagat's affection for the parents' family, consisting of her brothers and sisters, was also great. Being the eldest, she was much loved and greatly respected by them. She brought warmth and affection to her parents, sisters, and brothers. Although she did not receive a formal education, she was liberal in her views, a woman of strict discipline. Her personality held many in awe. Her loved ones will always remember her twinkling blue eyes, her ready wit and humor. Till last day of her life, she remained a lady. She used to enjoy traveling and had visited Europe, UK and USA with her husband. So broad-minded and large-hearted, and helped not only her loved ones but also the needy and the less fortunate. Mrs. Sukhnandan Bhagat and her parents followed the Sikh religion throughout her life. She had a prayer room at home. She regularly observed all the religious festivals and always followed the teaching of Guru Nanak. Her great faith helped her particularly during the times of crisis. Her devotion was a source of peace and comfort. This memorial lecture has been arranged under Mrs. Sukhnandan Bhagat Endowment, which was instituted by Sri G.K. Bhagat in the loving memory of his mother. Today, Mrs. Sukhnandan Bhagat Memorial Lecture will be delivered by Dr. Nilanjana Sanyal, seated by my side, Professor of Psychology, University of Calcutta. She will speak in English on blind obedience of women in patriarchal social frame, a rural Indian scenario. I am the least competent person to make any opening observation at this point. 7 accept the fact that we have the unique opportunity of listening to a remarkable person who has mastered not only her subject and has given rise to a whole generation of scholarship, but is also so empathetic in her mind that as a practitioner of her subject, she wins the heart and love of everyone she comes close by. And it is therefore really proper that we are going to have this kind of a subject to listen to, which is definitely a contrast to the life about which we have just heard. Mrs. Suklanand Bhagat came of a family and also nurtured another family which had a different, kind of ambience, compulsions, and also opportunities. But she upheld certain values and traditions which really speak highly of our, great heritage. We naturally expect that women in our country would also be in that kind of a position, whatever their social status. But this is not the reality today. And I think it is on that subject that we are going to listen in greater depth from none other than Professor Nilanjana Sanyal. Professor Sanyal, please. I also express my respect to the members of the family of Mrs. Bhagat present here. Namaskar.
Good evening, everybody. At the outset, before addressing anybody, I would like to offer my homage in memory to late Srimati Shuklanand Bhagat, for whose personality pattern, the values, such a memorial lecture has been arranged by his family members, particularly his son. Revered Swamiji Sri Shuparnananda Maharaj, the other monks of this institute, respected chairperson Professor Radharaman Chakraborty, respected family members of Mrs. Bhagat, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor being bestowed on me today because I have been given this opportunity to be the speaker on this occasion. For the same, I thank Maharajji, Sri Shuparnananda Maharaj. I thank Shayok, the coordinator of this program. Thanks goes to Professor Chakraborty and definitely the family members of late Mrs. Bhagat. I have been asked to say something on women education. Being the representative of this fraternity, this is a special honor I feel to take this podium today. Being a member of this glittering 21st century, having the opportunity of being educated in life, and having the supports of many men, significant ones in my life, starting from my father, my teachers, my husband, my sons, and other significant males and females. I consider myself to be a privileged woman, a privileged one to develop a career of my own. I teach psychology. I practice psychoanalysis for almost last 3 decades. The exposure to this subject in theoretical frame as well as practical situations, the exposures have given me many facts about women's life. Particularly, I would like to mention a feature that I have come across from so many different clients of mine particularly. When they find my therapy is working on them, judging my efficiency in the process, many of them came out with the appreciative note that you seem to be a joint figure for us, the father figure as well as the mother figure. And there I found this father concept being associated with a lady like mine comes from the fact that they equate efficiency, productivity, strength, everything with maleness. And automatically the concept of patriarchy comes in. Not only patriarchy, the concept of women empowerment and women issues are in vogue these days. There are reasons behind it. Having this educated society, we all are trying our level best to cover or to come across certain solution points to overcome certain weaknesses that are being inherent in assessing women in terms of their personalities, in terms of their productivities and contribution to the society. As I said, I consider myself to be a privileged woman, but such privilege is not available to many women around me. Today, I have picked up the topic of presenting the inner cries of women in rural India, with their dried eyes, broken hearts, and so many woes. They maintain a blind obedience to this patriarchy. Let's see how it works for them and where lies its solution. Before presenting my lecture, I would request everybody to consider this session to be an awareness campaign regarding women problem, particularly in rural setup, and try to do our level best to do something to improve on their life. I would be delivering the lecture being seated there because there's a physical ailment in my system. Due to weaker knees, I'm being prevented from standing for a long time to say something. Please, I'm sorry, forgive me for this. I'll be taking the seat and talking from there. The title of my presentation is Blind Obedience of Women in Patriarchal Social Frame, a Rural Indian Scenario. 8th of March this year, this is not only for this year, considered as International Women's Day. Early in the morning, I opened the page of Times of India. The first page had this advertisement from a company that says, that calls for, demands the equality of women with that of men. Don't tell us half-truths about how much you love us. Prove it by giving us our half of respect as a parent, our half of attention as a daughter, our half of opportunity as a colleague. It is not about making us feel like a princess for a day. It's about treating us as an equal for life. Women have been denied their half for far too long. This Women's Day, let's unite for the equal half. This is the demand. This is the demand of the sophisticated society, as well the demand of the rural women in their unspoken words. But the situation is different. India is rich in heritage, poor in economy, intense in patriarchal philosophy, and low in attitudinal components, missing layers of psychoeducation. Owing to its hierarchical social status, downward looks on deprived, underprivileged ones, rigid casteism having the concept of untouchability, discrimination and differentiation on the basis of political or socio-cultural power, a social bloc of downtrodden population has emerged prominently. Not only that, the deep gender bias prevailing in the cultural ambience has created the target victims to be women majorly. In the era of advancement of education and general lifestyle, the concern of the mass needs to be awareness regarding the tragedy of this women population to edge certain solution points. At 2001 census report, we find India had a female population of 96 million. India counts 15% of the world's women, characterized by vast regional differences and a variety of culture. But social discrimination and economic deprivation on the basis of gender is common to all, irrespective of religion, caste, community, and state that is there in India. In all societies, women have occupied an inferior position to men. The case of India is no exception. This is a global scenario as well as Indian scenario. In the respect, I need to quote Neera Desai saying, ideologically, woman was considered a completely inferior species, inferior to male, having no significance, no personality. The patriarchal joint family, the customs of polygamy, the parda, the property structure, early marriage, sati system, or a state of permanent widowhood, all these contributed to the smothering of the future development of women. The situation is different from that of any social group. This is because they are not the one of a number of isolable units, but half of a totality, the human species. Women are essential and irreplaceable. They are fundamental to the human condition, yet in their economic, social, and political role, they are marginal. It is precisely this combination of being fundamental and marginal at one and the same time that has been fatal to them. Within the world of men, their position is comparable to that of an oppressed minority. Here I have brought the concept of patriarchy. Patriarchy seems to be the prime obstacle to women's advancement and development. Patriarchy, definitionally, is a political social system that insists that males are inherently dominating, superior to everything and everyone, deemed weak, especially females, and endowed with the right to dominate and rule over the weak and to maintain that dominance through various forms of psychological terrorism and violence. John Bradshaw clear-sighted patriarchy to be a social organization marked by the supremacy of a father in the clan or family in both domestic and religious functions. Patriarchy is characterized by male domination and power status. Its demand is blind obedience from women, the foundation upon which patriarchy stands, the repression of all emotions except fear on the part of the women, the destruction of individual willpower, the attempt to be emotionally independent, and the repression of thinking whenever it departs from the authority figure's way of thinking. But peculiar enough, patriarchal thinking shapes the values of our culture. We are socialized into this system, females as well as males, and most of us learn patriarchal attitudes in our family of origin, and they are usually taught to us by our mothers, not the fathers, but by mothers. These attitudes were reinforced in schools and other institutions that we visit. Patriarchy demands of men that they become and remain emotional cripples. They are also forced to maintain it. Since it is a system that denies men full access to their freedom of will, it is difficult for any man of any class to rebel against patriarchy, to be disloyal to the patriarchal parent, be that parent a female or a male one. Citizens in this nation fear challenging patriarchy even as they lack overt awareness that they are fearful, so deeply embedded in our collective unconscious are the rules of patriarchy. So patriarchy has gone deep down into our layers of collective unconscious that prompts us to behave in a specific way. Psychological patriarchy is the dynamic process between those qualities deemed masculine and feminine, in which half of our human traits are exalted while the other half is devalued. Both men and women participate in this tortured value system. Men are given more values, women are necessarily devalued. Hence, psychological patriarchy is a dance of contempt, a perverse form of connection that replaces true intimacy with complex, covert layers of dominance and submission, collusion and manipulation. By highlighting psychological patriarchy, we say that everyone is implicated and we are freed from misperception that men are the enemy. They are not. Freudian describes women's unhappiness as the problem that has no name. Women felt this sense of depression because they are forced to be subservient to men financially, mentally, physically, intellectually, and I would definitely say emotionally. The feminine mystique was the idealized image to which women tried to conform despite their lack of fulfillment. Our variants of sociobiology, genetic makeup, evolutionary psychology, genes that determine our sexual behavior, oppression against women seem to justify systems of exploitation, oppression, domination, class hatred, and the like as something inescapable, unchangeable, and inevitable. The subject of women empowerment and development is a burning issue all over the world, including India, since last decades. Various international organizations like United Nations tend to make us alert about gender discrimination, inequalities between men and women. Discrimination towards men have also been age-old issues all over the world. Thus, women's struggle for equalities with men is a universal phenomenon these days. In rural India, the main role of women is a domestic worker or a worker in the field of agriculture. Due to their illiteracy, they are also unable to find out their power, role, and status in society. They always think themselves very weak and poor. As a result, they are exploited day to day until they are properly educated. In rural society, they work as parasite and they always keep themselves busy to help their husbands in various activities. They have no idea about their power and capabilities. This sign is very negative for social upliftment and economic development and cultural enhancement. They don't know what is human resource and the developmental role of women. They are totally off guard regarding their personal self-esteem. But the time is changing gradually towards the women. Provision of formal and functional education is needed for the following reasons. It would help them to realize their ability, power, and potentiality. They would get self-confidence, attain self-realization, and also can take decisions in their own way. It also makes them strong, self-fulfilled, and potential soul to enjoy in life. Educated women can play proper role of an ideal mother and can make her child a good citizen. In fact, the mother who has a solid identity of her own, help the children automatically to follow her as role model and be on their own, being emotionally and educationally independent. It would empower them to fight against discrimination of their folk, and they can take necessary action. It would give them economic power, also enable them to contribute quota to the economic growth of the whole nation. The growth of women's education in rural areas is very slow because they are being kept in a narrow world of their family and agricultural field. This obviously means that large women folk of our country are remaining illiterate, weak, backward, and exploited. Moreover, education is also not available to all equally. Gender equality is reinforced in education, which is proved by the fact of literacy rate for women, that is 65.46% in comparison to men as per 2011 census. The table will show the literacy rate from 1901 to 2011. If we put our mind on the 2011 condition, statistics say education rate is for men 82.15, but for women this is 65.46 only. Gender-wise literacy rate in rural urban areas reveal the fact that in rural condition in 2011, men 77.15%, but female 57.93 only. In urban setup, this is little higher, men being 88.76 in terms of literary rate, and women are 79.11. This is because they have the exposure, they get the opportunity to be literate. In our country, Vivekananda's comments are followed as formulations for us. He wanted Indian women to have an education that would create great fearless women, women worthy to continue the tradition of Shanghamitra, Leela, Ahulyabai and Mirabai, women fit to be the mothers of heroes. He reminded his countrymen that ancient India had produced women philosophers and scholars like Moitreyi and Gargi. They were capable of producing similar characters again with proper education for women. But women are offered a universe of their own, the universe of the family only. Like women herself, the family appears as a natural object, but it is actually a cultural creation. There is nothing inevitable about the form or role of the family anymore than there is about the character or role of women being depicted by other men or other members of the family. The true woman and the true family are images of peace and plenty. No provocation from women, no protest, only subservience, submission, and obedience. In actuality, they may both be the sides of violence and despair, given the chance. Yet today, the problem has become more prominent in the absence of knowledge regarding current attitude towards them. Let there be a call of the day to envision the situation with little more respect and concern to alter the situation for total betterment of mankind in the advanced century. Fourier, the socialist, was the most ardent and voluminous advocate of women's liberation and of sexual freedom among the early socialists. In a well-known passage he wrote, "The change in a historical epoch can always be determined by the progress of women towards freedom, because in relation of woman to man, of the weak to strong, the victory of human nature over brutality is most evident." Fourier, with his greater preoccupation with sexual liberation, saw it an index of humanization in the civic sense of the victory of humaneness over brutality. Bebel, another socialist, said woman was the first human being that tasted bondage. Woman was the slave before the slave existed in globe. Unless women are brought to take an independent part, not only in political life generally, but also in daily and universal public service, it is no use talking about full and stable democracy. The classical literature on the problem of women's condition is predominantly economist in emphasis, striving her simple subordination to institutions of private property. Her biological stature underpins both her weakness as a producer in work relation and her importance as a possession in reproductive relation. The fullest and most recent interpretation gives both factors a psychological cast. At the moment, verification is launched to locate psychosocial issues of downtrodden Indian women. In India, rural women constitute nearly 80% of the female population. They contribute largely to country's economy, which is ignored. Rural development programs for women have only in recent decades recognized the crucial role of organization and mobilization as strategies for women's empowerment and development. Rural women's organizations are also mechanisms for restructuring and redistributing power and have been utilized pressure groups that influence or bargain on behalf of rural women. The launching of the Community Development Program in 1952 was a landmark in the history of India that has adopted a systemic integrated approach to rural development. There was agriculture, animal husbandry, public health, women's development, rural industries, etc. that found a special niche in the framework cast for this purpose. 5,000 national extension service blocks were created under the Community Development Program by the end of the second five-year phase. During the third five-year plan, the momentum was maintained through a series of developmental schemes through allocations under the NES program tapered. This was succeeded by small farmers development agencies, followed by marginal farmers development agencies, crash schemes for rural development, food for work programs, drought-prone areas program, and desert development program in early 70s. The contents of these programs were to strengthen the rural base of economy and upliftment of women's life conditions there. The sixth plan accepted poor rural women to be targets of rural development strategies. Specific problems identified therein: marginality of attention and services to them in rural and agricultural development, special constraints that obstruct their access to available assistance and services, such as lack of training to develop their awareness and skills, lack of information, and lack of bargaining power, low productivity, narrow occupational choices, low level of participation in decision making, inadequate finance and expert guidance for providing socio-economic activity of rural women and their participation, inadequate monitoring of women's participation in different sectors, wage discrimination, inadequate application of science and technology to remove drudgery, and low health and nutrition status. Modernity has resulted in a growing flexibility and changes in the gender roles of men and women, no doubt, but the context is the very same for rural women even now. Being called deprived, these women are denied of economical, social, and physical rights. The prevailing social system conditions hindering the development of their hidden strengths and or qualities, sustenance of deprived states, personal drawbacks, depression, poverty, psychological and economical problems, as well as social suppression outlines the crater of downtrodden class. In India, members of gender, caste, class, ethnic identity experience structural discrimination that impact their health and access to health care. They have little control on the resources and an important decision related to their lives. In rural India, early marriage and childbearing affects women's health adversely. About 28% of girls in India get married below legal age and experience pregnancy. They have serious repercussions on the health of women. The average maternal mortality ratio at the national level is 540 deaths per lakh in childbirths. The rural maternal mortality rate is 617 deaths of women aged between 15 and 49 years per 1 lakh. In most cases, the deaths occur from preventable causes which are not available to them. A large proportion of women is reported to have received no antenatal care, like 1 tetanus toxoid injection and supplementary iron or folic acid tablets for 100 days as recommended by Reproductive Child Health Program. In rural India, institutional delivery is also lowest among women from the lower socioeconomic class, particularly in rural setup. Hence, the overall scenario picturizes their structural discrimination in the following fashion. In the structural discrimination, they have lack of education, which results in lack of job opportunity. On the other hand, lack of access to land as their own property. There is lack of access to health and nutritious food, discrimination faced due to negative attitude of health professionals and social caretakers, and low paid wage labor or unorganized labor. The same work when men do, they get the payment. That 10% of this is available only by women. The battered self-image reveals the following fact. Anatomically smaller and weaker, women's physiology and her psychobiological metabolism appear to render her a less useful member of a workforce. It is always stressed how, particularly in the early stages of social development, man's physical superiority gave him the means of conquest over nature, which was denied to women. Once women was accorded menial tasks involved in maintenance, whilst man undertook conquest and creation, she became an aspect of the things preserved. She's the possession, she's in custody of men. Walker said that as a result of such social phenomenal discrimination, the attitude of passivity in women takes a form of fatalism, learned dependency of helplessness established very early in life. Hence, a woman's self-concept revolves around the basic belief that she is the weaker sex, has always to look upon the man for her maintenance. Miller said, in a situation of inequality and powerlessness, these characteristics can lead to subservience and to complex psychological problems. In rural setup, gender bias in its various forms prevents hundreds of millions of women from obtaining education, health service, childcare, legal status needed to escape from poverty. Although women toil longer and contribute more to the family income than male family members, they are viewed as unproductive in familial context. The common image of a woman in the context is one lacking in courage, one who is submissive, docile, and against this background, she becomes an easy target for violence in response to others' requirements. Rape, sexual harassment, murder, wife beating, female infanticide, dowry deaths, and sati are the common cases in everyday life of them. The lack of education means the lack of self-reliance, self-confidence that put a bar on women's psyche to come out of their shackled lives. Vivekananda once again said, "Educate your women first and leave them to themselves. Then they will tell you what reforms are necessary for them." His idealism is definitely painted with bright colors theoretically, but not practically in the patriarchal supremacy of rural culture. It is estimated that about 850 million people in the world are illiterate. Out of these, 50% is there in India, and particularly in their rural setup. According to the 4th educational survey, in the plains, 95% of the rural population have access to primary school within 1 kilometer of their habitation. Middle schools are available to 78.8% within 3 kilometers from their habitation, but commuting to distant schools does pose a problem for girls. There are very few separate schools for girls. Parents in rural areas are very reluctant to send their daughters to co-educational schools. Moreover, in most schools, the teachers are male. Despite considerable emphasis in plans, the proportion of women teachers continues to be low. Provision for accommodation for women workers, including teachers, is far from being satisfactory. A large number of rural schools lack facilities such as proper building, adequate number of teaching rooms, drinking water, and especially toilet for girls. More than 85% primary and 70% middle schools in rural areas do not have this facility as per Family All India Educational Survey. Hostel facilities are just dreams. With illiteracy comes non-realization of constitutional goals of social justice and equality status of opportunity between men and women. After independence, various laws in favor of equality have enshrined the preamble of the Constitution, but none are being followed in rural cultures of India. Policies to extend knowledge of social welfare program and both formal and non-formal education to women have failed to bridge the gap between men and women, which was emphasized as the main task by National Committee on Women's Education. In 1958, the appeal was placed by Jawaharlal Nehru by saying, in order to awaken the people, it is the woman who has to be awakened. Once she is on the move, the household moves, the village moves, the country moves, and through the women, its children are brought into the picture and given the opportunity of a healthier life and better training. Thus, through the children of today, we build India tomorrow. Studies have revealed women carry 2/3 of the total workload in the country and receive not more than 10% of the total wages. Their low participation in education is due to girls from very early age need to look after their siblings. And secondly, they need to look after the household chores in order to relieve their parents to go out for work. This plays havoc in inhibiting the participation of women in education. Early marriage, frequent pregnancy affect the enrollment rates of girls in education. The members of downtrodden minorities in rural India hold an attitude of negativity towards girls. The upliftment of women is just not a matter of consideration there. Moreover, women are regarded to be passive and pliant units in social system, which confers on them a subordinate status where providence for their education is feared to equip the women to question this system. Hence is the bar put on their educational ventures. In rural areas, schools are located at a distance, and that is one of the significant points of not attending it. The net result of all these factors together is the culture of silence to be practiced, to have patience to tolerate all the exploitations within a reserved personality mold. In the similar tune, the problems of women's condition have become an area of silence within contemporary socialism. Issues in downtrodden rural women's education are therefore not issues only of educational sector, but they extend to meager economic resource, environment, employment, production process, etc. Indeed, the entire gamut of social and economic policy has a bearing on women's education and advancement in life. Education is expected to acquire basic skills and abilities and foster a value system of their own, raising their status in society. After independence, major emphasis was placed on different developmental projects for rural development, rural and urban development, but none of them have been reported to be successful. Programs were planned and implemented such as functional literacy for women in Integrated Child Development Services Program, Rural Functional Literacy Program in National Adult Education Program, Special Program for Women, all these are under Ministry of Education and Culture. Making women more conscious of the rights and responsibilities, the implications of the laws governing women's status in society, and developing an understanding about the manifest and concealed ways which cause women's oppression. assisting women to achieve economic viability through acquisition of literacy and other necessary skills, providing women access to knowledge in areas like health, childcare, nutrition, and family planning. Assisting women All these programs were launched with the aim in mind, making women more conscious of the rights and responsibilities, implications of the laws governing women's status in society, and developing an understanding about the manifest and concealed ways which cause women's oppression. But none of these programs work properly, assisting women to form their own groups for living and productive activity, strengthening their participation in the developmental process. Nothing has worked properly, so violence against women is the resultant feature. These are expressed in female infanticide, infant mortality, caste migration issues, domestic violence, dowry death, rape, khap panchayat, sati, child marriage, and honor killing, which is reported in our newspaper very regularly. The launch programs definitely had positive bearings to an extent, but not to an extent to alter the scenario of atrocities, adversities, and innumerable suffering account of downtrodden rural Indian women. The existing problem-enmeshed canvas of such women has following dimensions of physicality, social problems, economic deprivations, political power victims, and psychological cries of unaccountable forms and resources. Human rights violation and extreme poverty resulting in biopsychosocial ill health among rural Indian women, in stigma, discrimination, neglect towards them as gender minority group, violence directly being hurled towards them, harmful practices, etc. Developing vulnerability by preventing certain rights, they are reflected in right to health, right to education, right to food and nutrition, freedom from discrimination, right to housing, sanitation and equality, and quality of water. Preventing promotion of healthy rights. They receive not only torture, they are not only excluded, they are away from provisions of special health care, but right to social participation, right to information, and right to privacy is also not provided to them. The list of psychosocial issues of downtrodden rural Indian women are quite long and heavy with psychological dark patches. The unwritten hierarchical social political power, scratches of unjustified patriarchy, uneducated differentiation and discrimination, scathed gender bias, and enormous economic deprivation invite drudgery for such women. They cry silently in the absence of protest resource, and link at and bear the social scenario with their dried eyes and great muteness. Isn't it right time in the glorious 21st century to lend serious attention and concern for them, to alter the scenario, offering opportunities, resources, and humane, tender love and care to wrap up their life and realistic reliefs and a bunch of enjoyable years in their frail existence? Would we think? Let us hope. Thank you.
You have told all the negative things. Women are oppressed. Women are oppressed. They are not, the rules are not properly imposed. There should be some positive thing also.
Should I answer? না আপনি কভার করে দিন, আপনার টাইমে হয়ে যাবে। See,
okay, if you have any serious question, do please put it in simple words, and I think our speaker will try to answer, although the convention is this.
So one of the positive move
That I think has already been reported. Anyway.
I have reported that many programs have been adopted nationally, but they are programs in their outlines. They are not implemented properly. The scenario is definitely very, very depressive. That is why I had the responsibility of bringing out those things in front of everybody to be aware of the consequences of all the programs being implemented with no specific positive results. And that is why initially also I called it to consider this delivery as an awareness campaign, and at the end also I pledge that let us hope there would be some changes if we personally take the vow of looking after them, we develop positive concern regarding their upliftment and advancement. If we all individually try to take up certain steps in helping these women to be full of life, to have positive flares of enjoyable years to live in this earth, on this earth, we can make it. That is my pledge to all of you.
Shall we conclude? Can I use the few minutes left and say a few words? Well, I think that we are facing now an audience which is partly satisfied, but definitely largely dissatisfied. If you say that this is because of the lack of opportunity to raise questions, I would say that, well, this is not actually the real reason why we should feel dissatisfied. Would you really change the scenario which has been presented just now, very ably, with great deal of illustration, etc.? Would we be able to change the scenario even a bit, even a little, by raising a few intelligent questions and snatching out of the speaker some very interesting replies also? This will be an engagement. This will be a kind of dialogue between us, we who are well placed. I don't think this is going really to change anything unless we remember the last question and the last request. Should we not think? And then she leaves us with a hope. Let us hope that we will think. Then we will act. I would like to say very modestly certain things with my limited capacity as a student of social sciences. The most important component of this presentation is about attitude. And I would put it in a different way, inclination. Inclination within the family of members, both male and female, within the family, towards the question of women's predicament, rural or urban. Are we really thinking of, she has requested us to think, are we really thinking seriously of changing our attitude? I am reminded of a very famous statement by the now deceased Prime Minister of Pakistan, a woman, Benazir Bhutto, in an international conference on women. She suggested many things, one of which was women will be deemed to have achieved some amount of independence and respect if women gain the opportunity of determining the size of their family. When will they bear children? When will they not? what size of family they are going to take care of. Yes, family definitely is the universe. I am quite in agreement with the speaker. Family is definitely the universe of the, well, women, not only women but also men. Unless this attitude changes, no substantial change would occur in the first place. I am glad that this audience consists of a sizable number of women. Most of them, I presume, are mothers already, mothers-in-law also, some daughters-in-law maybe. Have they really examined their own situations? If they do, I think that will also add to, that will also help society to change a little bit. Professor Amartya Sen is famous mainly for his poverty study. I am not enamored of his other contributions, really. It is the poverty study where he posits the very fundamental fact of life in a family: how much of bread goes to the mouth of the male child and how much of bread goes to the mouth of the female child. That is the basic question. And it happens in the rural societies very much, even today. But this strange and also inexplicable thing is that the little girl child accepts this with a good deal of grace. It's not merely oppression, domination, subversion, etc. These are all there very much. But you see the kind of grace with which women accept this thing and don't revolt, you see. It's also really something very strange. I am not arguing in favor of this attitude, but I say this is also a fact. If change of attitude is to be thought about, well, should we not encourage this submissiveness, if you call it submissiveness, or good grace? This is an illusion, whether it's good grace or it's submissiveness. A question that has got to be answered not by any other person but by women themselves. The growing girl child has to answer this, not her mother, not her mother-in-law, not her elder sisters, because they have gone through a different kind of experience and their experience has been solidified. They have become part of the system. If you ask them to revolt, they cannot do it. Simply they cannot. Education, of course, there will be. It's very obvious. Well, when all the sages, including Swamiji or Vidyasagar, whoever you name, well, education has to be there. But with what outcome? Education is not equally available to even to poor children, male or female, in the rural society. It's not equally available. Whatever little education is available has got to be made use of. But before the little child goes to school, this little child must have the confidence in her that she is going to school in the same spirit and with the same expectation as her little brother. It doesn't matter whether they are going to a co-ed school or any other school. It doesn't matter whether they are going to an ill-equipped school. The point is that they are going to the same school with the same purpose. And I am therefore talking about what is called the functional environment in which all women have to operate. Poor or middle class or rich families, well, they provide a certain environment, and it is that environment in which women have to function. It is their universe, and this universe is also slowly changing. The gentleman over there is certainly right. in trying to point out that, well, things are changing. Definitely things have to change. If they don't, then we humanity, part of the humanity, are also doomed. But that is not the reality. Things are really moving, and that has got to be accepted and appreciated. After about 70 years of our independence, this is the first time that we hear a gentleman called Prime Minister of the country is first time talking about Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. Why not the other leaders? We had also women leaders. We had women president of India also. So it's not a gender question. It's a question of attitude. No, please don't raise any political issue. This is the barren land. If you talk about politics, it is a barren land. If you talk about economics, it is even barren. But more productive is the social area. It's a social area where we all move about. Politics is only incidental. Economics is vital but not fundamental. Politics is incidental. It is not necessary. Economics is definitely, well, part of our life, but it is not fundamental. What is fundamental is the social milieu in which we move about. My last point is this. Poet Tagore was really yearning like anything to go to that land which he heard that had transformed the position of women, and that was Soviet Union. At a very old age, he had the opportunity to go there. Well, he had many things to criticize about the Soviet system, but the first thing that really struck him, and he appreciated in so many words, the freedom, the right of enjoyment of life that is now being granted to the women folk. So also Swamiji, how he felt. Well, women in the Western society, which was not as yet, revolutionized like the Soviet Union, but still they offered this thing. And if they can do so many things, why can't we be doing a little of that? I think the time has come, after 70 years of our independence, that somehow or other some awakening is happening somewhere, and politics, although it's barren, is trying to take a different turn. If somebody cries loudly about keeping this rural India clean enough, Swachh Bharat, after 70 years of independence, if somebody says that the Beti has got somehow to be nurtured and opportunities must be made by the state, it is the responsibility of the state. You don't have to invite, well, great economists like Amartya Sen to prove that we are poor. It is enough that some call has been given, and the fight lies with, I would say, the fight lies with women. And what about us, the men folk who have been historically responsible for this state of affairs? Patriarchy is not matriarchy. In matriarchal society there is a great deal of justice, misused by men. In patriarchal society we have a different system. In matriarchal society, well, there is, well, enough responsibility and authority somehow or other, well, belonging to the women folk. How could this happen? I am not going to suggest that today's society will convert again itself to what is called the matriarchal society, but, well, we people who talk so much glibly about worshipping mother, wherever we go, Mayer Puja, Mayer Puja, Mayer Puja. মায়ের বাড়িতে গেলে কি ভালোই লাগে, হ্যাঁ? মায়ের পুজো শুধু ওইটুকু করলেই হবে? মায়ের নামে ভালো কিছু উৎসর্গ করলাম, মায়ের বাড়িতে গেলাম, একটু ভজন কীর্তন শুনলাম, তাই কি মায়ের পুজো? না মা ওই রকম চেয়েছিলেন? মা কিন্তু শেষ জীবন পর্যন্ত একটি মেয়ের জন্যে এই ধরাধাম ত্যাগ করেননি। এটা বলেই শেষ করব। বলেছিলেন যে ওই মায়ার জালটুকু আমি রেখে দিয়েছি, কারণ ওকে কেউ দেখবে না, ও পরিপূর্ণ ব্যক্তিত্বর মধ্যে আসেনি, ও খুব দুর্বল একটি মেয়ে, ওর কিছু একটা ব্যবস্থা করে দিয়ে তবে এই ধরাধাম আমি ত্যাগ করব। এটাকে বলে এমপ্যাথি। আমি বলছিলাম গোড়াতেই যে আমরা এমন একজনের কাছে আজকে আলোচনা শুনলাম যার মধ্যে পাণ্ডিত্য আছে, ওনার বক্তৃতার মধ্যে সেই পাণ্ডিত্য প্রকাশিত হয়েছে, সে নিয়ে মন্তব্য করার প্রয়োজন নেই। কিন্তু এসব কথা তখনই বলা যায় যখন ভিতরে একটা সত্যিকারের টান থাকে। তো জানি না আমাদের মধ্যে যারা আমরা আছি, আমরা তো ভালোই আছি, আমাদের তো সেরকম আমরা অসুবিধার মধ্যে নেই। তো আমরা যেই পরিবার থেকে আমরা সবাই এসেছি, আমাদের পরিবারে এরকম কোনো দুর্ঘটনা যেসব কথা বলো এগুলো খুব একটা হয় না। আমাদের অন্য রকমের দুর্ঘটনা আছে, সেটা প্রাচুর্যের দুর্ঘটনা। It's called the crisis of affluence. Whatever woes and worries we have in our life, in our society, in our families, are all the outcome or the result of the woes of affluence. And the other side of the picture is the woes of poverty. What part of this problem are you going to solve now? So far as us are concerned, well-placed, well-off, well-fed, well-clad, well-educated women in our own families and societies, what do they need? Again, the attitudinal change. My humble submission, please don't mind if I have gone too far of my limits. Thank you so much, and I must thank the speaker today. I should also thank the audience here. I'm sorry, the tradition does not permit any question-answer session.